Hello, parents. This is Anne Arundel County Public Schools, and you're listening to the Maryland Crabs Podcast.
Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs Podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Frenay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Frenay.
Well, it is the Maryland Crabs. We're here from the Commons on West Street, and we have joining us today a repeat guest. He might get a blazer. Alex Pline, who is the chairman of the Annapolis Transportation Board, and he's also the founder of... Former chairman. You got fired?
I left.
Did you storm out?
No, I joined the planning commission, so resigned.
Okay. And he is also, the city's website needs to be updated then. Maybe we can talk to somebody about that. And he's also one of the co-founders of Bike AAA, which is Bike Annapolis in Anne Arundel County. And we got some guy from Australia down here at the end of the table.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Great, thanks. Great.
And we are going to talk a little bit about the bike lane, if it hasn't been talked enough in the last couple weeks in Annapolis.
What bike lane?
Yeah. What bike lane? Yeah. You go out of town for 2 weeks and look what the damn council does, right?
I gotta say there is a hysterical quality to the Eastport Neighborhood Forum. Whether there's a valid point or not, everything is a 10 on the hysteria scale right now.
Yeah. It really is. True. But there's been a lot of speculation, a lot of talk and everything else about the bike lane. And do I even need to explain to anybody what the bike lane
Go
is?
ahead.
But it's
No, I think you should, because even on the 10th thing on the Eastport Neighborhood Forum, there are always people dipping in saying, "What bike lane?"
I think that's me being funny. Yeah.
No. I mean, just a name that I hadn't seen in the comment. So
I've never been downtown, so I don't know what you're talking about. But I'll bitch about it.
No, I think it's worth.
But yeah, no. The city has done a test of a bike lane. We've got a master bike history. We've got a master bike plan that was established or codified back in like 2012, 11 or 12. And the city now has turned around and they have installed what they call a
contraflow
bike lane, which is a hard delineated by a physical barrier lane going the opposite direction of travel as vehicles on Main Street. And it goes from the foot of Main Street to the top of Main Street, so from circle to circle for the most part. And it's been highly, highly controversial.
But let's also set more context that that's essentially the termination of a route that will go from Parole to City Dock, some of which is there via the Poplar Trail, other pieces that are being considered.
So it is a piece of a larger
network
puzzle.
Yes.
Right. And as is the master bike plan itself. I mean, There's pieces that exist right there now, and it will...
But the context is important because... without it, some of the criticism certainly is true, but within the context of that larger plan.
Right.
Well, that's the problem too, is because people like me, I mean, I'm relatively...
Right, you only know what you see.
Exactly. I didn't know there was a master bike plan until recently. And all of a sudden you plop down a bike lane in the middle of downtown, and it does seem silly. Like on Forest Drive, there's that one stretch of bike lane in front of Safeway that's like a block long, and it's just ridiculous.
But the other piece of the bike lane on Northwest Street and around the circle, I mean, I probably ride that, coming into downtown 4 days a week, and it's great. It slows cars on Northwest Street as they're, going 40 miles an hour coming off Robb Boulevard. The lanes are a little bit narrow. You have a place to ride, and it's much nicer.
Well, it is getting there. And I will say, I noticed this weekend that the county, or maybe the state, did Riva Road. They restriped Riva Road coming off of the South River Bridge toward Harbor Center to add some bike lanes there. But this sort of came on as a surprise to some. I mean, now, in defense of everybody that's squawking, the city is known for doing plans and studies and ignoring them. And they have done that for years and years and years with
the master plan.
And paying tens of thousands of dollars for the studies and then not doing anything with them.
Well, then going back to doing another study after they didn't do anything after the first study. And that's bureaucracy, and you have new administrations come in, and there's no continuity.
True. And this bike lane actually is a part of the bicycle master plan. that was in there. My argument is that it wasn't quite done in the time frame that the bicycle master plan laid out as far as the phasing goes there. But why, to you, Mayor Buckley, why was there such a short notice on this? Now, I know that you had addressed the Downtown Annapolis partnership when you announced the bike share, and you said you were moving forward with the bike lanes. I don't recall you specifically talking about a contraflow lane on Main Street, but you possibly could have. It was kind of loud and a lot of people were there. But that wasn't a public meeting per se. That was actually an invitation-only thing for the Downtown Annapolis partnership.
I thought that was open to everybody, and we had gone into all the businesses and invited all the businesses on Main Street. So my understanding was, most people most of the stakeholders were there or were involved in that. So I'd say that, the reason it happened is that bike share came online, and I thought this would be a good time for us to actually coordinate some bike paths with the bike share program. And I think sometimes that's what happens, and I've always seen it in the city. We spend money on a bike rack, but it's really not that safe to get to the bike rack. So I'd say I pulled some executive power to make it happen. And I have to own that. I have to own that decision. It's all my decision. I want to say though, instead of a study, a $50,000 study or a $20,000 study, we have all the decking, we have all the bumpers, we have all the uprights. All those things will be redeployed into the extension of the bike path and into other programs that we do in other areas of the city, where we try to create cafes that you see all over the country and all over the world, where they take a little parking space and they make it into a pretty little cafe outside of a restaurant. That's what I plan to do with those 4 foot by 8 foot decks pieces. They will go on and be used as an idea on Maryland Ave that I'm presenting on Thursday. It could be something we do on 4th Street. It could be something we do in West Annapolis. But we own that. The city owns that material. And I promise you it will get used again and again and again to stimulate economic ideas. Okay,
and I will say that the bike share thing I think is a fantastic idea. I have not had the chance to use it yet. I don't know how well it's
Go ahead and describe what the program is.
Being received. I have heard from some county employees that they laugh at the one out at the Arundel office complex out there.
I think they have bike races at lunch in the parking lot.
No, it cost you 50 cents or whatever it is.
Well, but, you want me to describe the bike share a little bit? So it's a hybrid model between what they call docked bike stations, like Capital Bike Share in Washington.
And that's where you need to return it to
where you take it from a dock and you return it to a dock. So the trips that you can take are naturally guided by where the docks are.
Right. So if I rent a bike from company A,
it's only one.
I need to take it from their rack, and I need to put it back to another one of their racks someplace else.
So where you can go, it's like it performs more it's the bicycle version of transit, really, where you have a fixed starting point and a fixed ending point based on where these stations are. And then there was the dockless ones like Mobike and Lime Bike, where these companies just came in and sort of puked them out on the streets, and they're all GPS enabled, and you just find one on the street, you rent it with the app, you use it, and you leave it wherever. And those got left in the Potomac, they got left on the ice, they got left wherever in people's apartments. So there are lots of problems with those. The Pace Bike Share is a hybrid between the two. So they are normally at the 10 racks docks around the city, but you can also leave them outside the docks as long as they're locked to a real bike rack. So bike racks that the city has put in, or you could stop at Grawls, which is a private place that has a bike rack.
I know that Chesapeake Brewing has installed a bike rack at their own cost. So, that's a legitimate place to lock it up.
So the idea is it's the best of both worlds, where you're not limited sort of in these fixed routes, if you will, fixed starting and ending points. So you have a lot more flexibility, but trying to reduce the sort of negative externalities of the dock.
Here's a question for you that you might be able to answer to me. Say I decide I want to ride that to work, and I rent the bike share and I pedal it to work, and I lock it up at a rack, and I want to get home at night. Mm-hmm. That bike could be gone, right?
If somebody else unlocked it, sure, and took it, yeah.
Okay. So there is no way to hold on to or to claim that bike for a day, to use it
actually,
reliably for a community.
So this is in some of the details of, you can actually lock it and hold it. So
you're continuing to pay for that
at
that point, right?
Yeah, it's fair.
So not cost effective to leave it for 8 hours.
I was picturing John keeping an Uber guy at his house all the time because he didn't want to give him up.
But I mean, if you're running into a store for half an hour, you could lock it and
hold it, or for dinner or something like that.
They're really cool because they don't have any the gears. There's no chain.
Fixie.
Yeah, I've never seen that before.
I remember when you launched that, you said it was a really funky kind of a bike to ride. But back on the bike lane, I mean, the businesses are up in arms on Main Street, and parking is, and I do believe it is a perception problem as opposed to a physical problem. It will become a very big physical problem as soon as Hillman comes crashing down with that. Let
me say this though, and the protests by the business owners, I understand it. This is something that happened fast and it's new, but I will say this: I have seen myself. So many of the employees who work in the restaurants and bars, they park out there. I've seen them come out and feed the meters many times. I've texted you when I've seen that happen. And that drives me crazy because that's not so if they're complaining about losing business, a lot of times it is their employees who are in those spots. I'm not saying all the time, but I'm saying that is a big problem.
Sometimes the owners too.
I mean, the city's guilty of that as well.
Yeah.
So that's, but I mean, the business owners are upset. I mean, the parking, we have 36 spaces. Depends on which Facebook page you read. It could be 100 spaces or 50, but it's 36, I believe, that have been lost. And in return, you've been able to arrange with Annapolis Elementary School to open up their parking lot to SP Plus to manage it on nights and weekends, which has 40 spots.
Something like that,
to be able to park in. So you're going to eliminate to be able to park right in the front of a store or a restaurant, and you may have to walk up, halfway Main Street,
which is not half as good. I understand that.
No, and one of the business owners, Rock Tays, his Back Creek Books, has said time and time again. But how are you going to measure this? And this is a big question that I've also have as well. And I know that your chief of staff said that it was just going to be public perception, and I'm thinking, well, it depends whether you were standing at the top of Main Street on Friday night, or whether you were standing down at City Dock on Friday night, how the public perception received the bike track. Is that true? And how are you going to measure?
I think we're going to use several different ways to measure it, but the most important one is the actual experience. So the experience of people riding, the experience of people sitting in cafes, the experience of loss of business. That there's nothing more real than what we presented for this month. You actually have a first-hand result of that. We have an online survey where you can go online and sort of give your opinions on an online survey. On Thursday, I'm meeting the business community from the street, and I might not make it out of that alive.
I was going to say, have you named an acting mayor in case
at O'Brien's?
But also, it's a demonstration in the way it gives people who never had experience with a protected bike lane the opportunity to see what that's like, because a lot of people just will never ride a bike if they have to ride in traffic with cars, even if it's going slow.
I might argue with you, though, Alex, and say that as a casual bike rider that I am, Main Street doesn't intimidate me. It was wide enough that cars could wiggle around me if I'm huffing and puffing and going real slow and croaking in the whatnot. I know you've got the issue with getting doored where somebody doesn't see you and opens the door, and that's happened, I think, on Main Street. As far as I was able to find, about one time in the last 9 years. So it's not happening all the time. Put that bike track on Forest Drive, I'd be like your best friend forever, because I will ride at Quiet Waters Park from my house, and I have about, the distance from like the Giant, to Quiet Waters Park on Forest Drive, and I'm just like, oh my God, get me off of here as quickly as possible.
But as a temporary
you don't drive on Forest Drive, do you really? I wouldn't never drive a bike on Forest Drive.
But as a temporary thing, regardless of whether having it permanently on Main Street's the right thing to do or not, because it's here, it gives somebody the opportunity to experience a protected lane. So we all know whenever October 19th it's going to get disassembled, but up until then, it gives people the chance to say, "Hey, how does this feel when I ride a bike?" Because the cycling community much to people who don't ride bikes, is that it's not a monolithic group. There's everybody from kids, at the other end of the spectrum, nutballs like me that I've said, I'll ride anywhere. But there's a lot of people who just will not ever ride in traffic. They will never get on a bike if they have to ride in the same lane.
I wouldn't do it.
So they have to ride a bike path.
Or
a
bike lane.
Something that's separated from cars, because even if they're moving slowly, some people just feel so uncomfortable.
Does that count for paint too? Does paint count in that? So you're
physically separate.
Some people need a physical.
So like the
Jersey barrier,
the 10-foot lane by Safeway on Forest Drive,
yes,
for example. So you get 10-foot thing, you got a big buffer. People will ride that because
but it's like 100 feet long.
Well,
that would be a dream if the whole of Forest Drive was like that.
Yes,
that'd be amazing.
that'd be phenomenal.
The perception is, as a bike rider, I don't think somebody's gonna, in one momentary lapse of attention, they're not going to kill me. But if you're riding in traffic, somebody looking at the radio could, even if you're going 3 miles an hour, could jam you in another car.
Well, we've heard all sorts of tragic stories. I mean, you've got Trish Cunningham on Riva Road. You had the guy up in the professor up at the Towson professor, I believe, that was hit by the Episcopal bishop.
That's
she was drunk. Yeah. But that's something that you contend with on the road. Whether I don't care whether you're texting or talking on a phone or drinking. I mean, you're impaired at some point.
Yeah, and people see things like that, and they say, that could be me. I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to ride anywhere that's not physically separated.
Well, I think we have an issue. We were talking about this before the podcast. You call it the last mile. And I was just saying that where I live in the county is separated from the rest of the county by the city. And I wouldn't let my kids bike to the bus to use public transportation because there's no bike lane to get them to the first bus stop. And I find that Annapolis, and I've seen that European comparison all over Facebook lately, and I don't know if that's a fair comparison, but this is a rough town for bicyclists, and I'm not a bicyclist. And the ones that I see who are bicyclists, they're ones who are like you, Alex, that are pros, and they do this. I see very few casual bicyclists out there, mainly because I wouldn't do it. It's very difficult. You have 3 thoroughfares.
They don't feel comfortable.
No, you've got West Street, you've got Forest Drive, and you got Rowell Boulevard, and they're all intimidating. So getting around town is very difficult without any sort of the trails, the bike paths. So downtown, it was a surprise. Aesthetically, I got to admit, I'm not crazy about the aesthetics of it, and that's something you can tweak over time.
Right.
Well, here's a question for you. I want to interrupt real quick. Aesthetically, okay, let's say that everybody loves this. There's no controversy. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And you've got the money, and we're rebricking and everything else now. Is this what we could expect if this were to go permanent to look like, with those parking curbs and the delineators, or is there something else that's...
I think that we just overkilled it on safety with those white uprights. What are they called, Alex? Sorry. And the curbs. And the public works guys, I mean, they are not about this sort of stuff. I had to sort of really convince them that this is just a trial, and so they did every single thing they could to overkill the safety of it. That's why it's so loud and so in your face. If you did it the way we've seen it done in other places, there's planters and there's bricked curbs and all that sort of stuff. It's much prettier than what you're witnessing now.
Okay, and I think it's an important distinction, because a lot of people are talking about how horrible it looks.
I mean, if this were to go forward into the design for the rebricking, it would go through all of those usual review processes. HBC, transportation, public work. I mean, it would go through the litany of public hearings that happen on large projects like that. So
I think it might do, if you could get a drawing of what it might look like in a permanent situation.
Right.
If it goes, I mean, obviously without doing a study or something like that would certainly go a long way to appeasing some of the people that are looking at the aesthetics.
Well, there many. So I know people really poo-poo this comparison with European cities, which I think is a knee-jerk reaction. I think we have much more in common with European cities than people think, and that's a cultural issue.
Well, before we started, I don't know whether you were in here. I said it's funny how people like the council will say, "Oh my God, we can't possibly look at Rockville or any other city because we're so unique. There is no city.
We are not I'm sorry, we are not a special snowflake.
I mean, but that is a huge argument. Now the argument for the bike lanes and whatnot is, hey, look at all these cities. So I don't know whether it is. I mean, there are certainly something that we can learn.
Well, let me ask. So let's go backward, because I saw that comparison so many times on Facebook. People arguing back and forth, and someone said, "Stop comparing us to Europe." And
Facebook.
So we would be close to a European city because we're colonial. So we were built at a time that was probably similar to European villages, and so we have the narrow streets, we have the brick streets, and what have you. So space is a premium. So what would make us? How do they do this in Europe, where they're not fighting for space and with downtown shopping district? How do they do it differently?
Well,
what's their approach?
Well, I mean, so first of all, we have the city's 8.5 square miles, which is about 2 miles in a radius of 2 miles. So you can pretty much get anywhere within the proper city limit boundaries. So it's compact. The density actually of Annapolis is 4,000 people per square mile. It's pretty high. So I mean, that's not dissimilar. But if you look at
so how do they make it work then? That's I picture
so,
Europe. They're
places
wearing their berets and they have the baguette. And
they prioritize pedestrians. I think that it starts with people, and then they comes out from there. So it's pedestrians, runners, bikers, and then thirdly it's cars. And obviously they deal with lots smaller cars than we do.
Well, that's a big
so
part
that
of it,
helps
actually,
a lot. It's not big SUVs double parking on Main Street. So I think that's why it's easier there. But really, it's about creating good public space. That seems to be a priority in other cities. That is the most important thing. Where does the community meet, and how do you create good public space? And this exercise is about that. It's not even about bikes, really. I love it when I see some people running down the path. I love it when I see people skating down it. It's just about making Main Street more experiential than it is right now. And I think Jimmy DeButt's article was a good article. We see the city in our rearview mirror when we go down it. We should be taking the time to go the other direction. So.
Have you talked to anybody that's opposed to bikes as a concept? I mean, I know there are people that don't like them.
I don't like them. And also, I don't like the culture that goes with the entitlement. That I was turning onto Forest Drive the other day, and a guy sailed through the red light.
Wait. Let's not get it. No. If you read any article, like in the Washington Post on bike infrastructure,
mammals,
I guarantee you, within the first 3 comments, you're going to have damn bikers don't follow the law.
That's me.
Then the next one is damn car drivers don't follow the law, and then it just all goes south from there. So let's not even go there, because it's like a red herring.
They don't stop at lights.
And those type A, the type A,
and I'm sure you stop at every
races,
stop sign when you drive.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm Captain Rules follower.
But I mean, has anybody approached
See, we're already
the mayor and said, why are we even thinking about accommodating bicyclists?
I think that the Main Street people are not against bicycles. I think they're against a bike lane on Main Street. Mm-hmm. But I do think that when people use the argument, no one bikes in this town, there's a reason, because it's not safe.
Oh, let me go backwards. So that dovetails into my argument. So I'm going back. I'm not continuing the argument. What I'm saying is the reason you and I are having this clash is because there are cities not set up for bicyclists. So you have that clash because they're using.
But it could be.
That's what I'm saying. If they had a dedicated path, or they had a bike path that they're not swinging in front of me when I'm following the law, I'd have no problem with it because they're in the bike lane.
So there's a great video that you should go watch. You can find it on YouTube.
Take on Me by Aha.
How the Dutch got their bike lanes, and so everybody thinks of the Netherlands as it's always been this sort of bike nirvana, but it was not that way in the 70s. I mean, they basically knocked down historic buildings to widen roads and do all the stuff that every other city in the world did when the automobile was like the thing. And then basically kids, it's all about the children, right? So kids started dying, and the politicians there said, enough. And they changed it, and they basically rededicated a lot of that right-of-way, rededicated it back to pedestrians and bikes and a bunch of other stuff. So that was a political decision that the Netherlands made.
There's definitely a culture that needs to be evolved here. I mean, we look at. I was just talking to my girlfriend the other day. I saw a Hummer going down the road and went, Damn, I haven't seen one of those in years. So, I mean, we've had a cultural shift from these giant SUVs down to smaller.
I don't know. I agree with Gavin. I was thinking about that. We go to Ireland every couple of years, and we rented the SUV. That's what they said, and it was ridiculous. It wasn't. It was a tiny little car, and that. So I mean, because it's a small country, and so we do have these.
Did you get the extra ice in your?
But so culturally, and I'll plug my opinion piece that you published in Annapolis. But I think in general in this country, for people of my age, so I'm at the end of the baby boomer era, people of our age view cycling as a recreational activity, and that like what's wrong? You put your bike on the back of the car, you drive someplace, and you go ride your bike. And I get it. That's the era that we grew up in, but that's how I think people view bike, and they don't view it as something that you can actually get real work done. Like, I'm going to use this for transportation to get to work.
I would never think to. I mean, to me, it's like, let's go bicycling. Let's go to quiet waters.
And that's part of this thing about, the bike community not being a monolithic community. I mean, there are people, especially younger people now, that live in larger cities. That's their transportation mode, and that's good. And there are people that recreate, and, everybody.
Going back to that, we say that Annapolis isn't a snowflake. We're not that special. Maybe to an extent we are a little bit, in so much as if you grew up if you're in DC or Baltimore, everything's on top of each other. Everything is within reach.
But my point is, it's that way here too. We're not that big a city.
But you still got to go down Forest Drive or West Street. I think that's.
I'm with you, Tim, on the the speed racer dudes. I ride a road bike as well, and those guys sometimes they get annoying, and I always joke. In my house, when I first started riding those and slipping into Lycra, my wife's like, "You're not leaving the house in that outfit, are you?" And now
you got to stop mammals.
Yes, middle-aged men in Lycra.
And now I'll be in my cycling outfit, and I go, "Babe, what do you think?" I said, "Some people call this a cycling outfit. I call it a sexual repressant for women."
Keeping me faithful for years.
No, but I think there is a shift now that's happening with the younger generation that is looking at, is wanting to be able to ride a bike around for transport.
So my kids, they were talking about this recently, because I grew up in the inner suburbs, and we were a block away from People's Drugstore. So that was the local drugstore at the time. And I was up there like 3 or 4 times a day. There was a lunch counter, and my kids, I was telling them the story last time we were visiting my mother, and they thought that was amazing. And my kids, who live in Nirvana, they live like on the water. They can go boating and fishing right after school. They can do things I always dreamed of. And they're moping. They say, you had so much better growing up because you could get places. You were so close to the mall. You could do all these things. And they're right to a big extent. They live in a great neighborhood, but getting out of that neighborhood is impossible for them, because I'm not letting them ride the 2 miles along Arundel on the Bay Road to get to the nearest bus stop. They can't do it. So I think, and you would look at Hillsmere and say the same thing, or look at Bay Ridge, or look at all the other communities that are just, they're not far from downtown Annapolis per se, but it's a difficult route to get there the way it's set up currently.
Because we're so car-centric, it's not just bike paths. They didn't even build sidewalks in these neighborhoods.
Exactly.
There's so many neighborhoods that haven't even got sidewalks. So we've never prioritized walking or biking. And so it's slow going to make it come around. But look at the cities in the country that are investing in bike infrastructure. Those cities are, ranking as these livable places. They're not only an amenity for your community and a way to activate and mobilize all of your community. I mean, young and old, if this infrastructure's there, everybody will start to do it. And it's not only a way to exercise, but it's a way to get to a job in these communities. In Seattle and cities like that, you see everybody riding a bike to work. You don't see that around here at all.
And one of you said it before the podcast, saying that the county, and I'm sure that our county is no different than most others, have put their money and their priorities into the bike paths at parks and what have you, which are great. But you have to drive to the park and with your bike to do that. And I mean, look at public housing in this city. We've always talked about the 2 and now 3 Annapolises, but you have the African American community that lives in public housing. I never see any of them downtown. I don't see them outside of their community for the most part, because it's their long Forest Drive and it's very difficult to get anywhere. And those kids don't get out of those communities any more than my kid gets out of their community, because they can't bike outside.
So this bike path we're talking about, this one that stretches from the historic district all the way to the mall and the Parole Town Center and the Arundel Medical Center, it will go through Bowman Place. It will go through Annapolis Gardens. So it'll cut through 2 public housing communities. And on the ride we did on Saturday, the president of Lon Powell, I don't know if he's been on your show, he's a great guy, who's the president of the Parole Association, a family for generations have grown up in parole. He rode in with his kid, and that's what we want to do. We wanted people to come in with families and feel safe to get in there. Once you get in the historic district, you're on your own, but people are only travelling at 25 miles an hour in that inside the city, and the Eastport Bridge is slow going. But if you could get from the center of the city over to Eastport or West Annapolis, or just mosey around the historic district or go to Maryland Ave, that's the objective.
What is the overall concept of the master bike plan? Right now, the argument is that we've got a lane, going from nowhere to nowhere. And obviously it's not quite, because you've got the circle, you've got lanes now around Church Circle and Northwest Street, down into Calvert. But ultimately, and I know I was at the business meeting with the Downtown Annapolis Partnership. One phrase that you used is that you wanted to create ultimately a cultural necklace, I think is what the term was that you used. So where specifically, I mean, not ideally, I mean, we've heard the Poplar Trail. Where is that? Can you explain where the existing bikes are or bike trails are in the city and how we're going to connect them between the both of you?
What I would do, if Whitmore Park, where we did the Annapolis Rising, that area there. So that the new Jeff Huntington Pearl Bailey mural, that will connect between the Job Center and the garage at Whitmore, go across West Washington Street, go behind the Lowe's Hotel. The Lowe's Hotel has just been bought by a company called The Graduate, and The Graduate's logo is a bike. And so, and they're a progressive company that buy hotels that are in college towns. So we believe that they're going to buy into this idea for their access road. So the access road behind Lowe's Hotel will be a bike path.
And that's going to have access to Clay Street as well, too.
And you can break off to Clay Street as you come across West Washington. Right. Then you will go on to the Poplar Trail, at the other end of the Poplar Trail, past Germantown.
The Poplar Trail is back in Admiral Heights and
so it's right through the center of German. So basically, this east-west route, more or less, is the old WB&A Electric Railroad right away. And
then it would go through Annapolis Gardens, behind Kentucky Fried Chicken and Burger King and all those places, out onto Gibraltar. In Gibraltar, there's a development, a workforce housing development. That development has agreed to put in biking infrastructure that will pop out onto West Street, right around the Lighthouse Liquor Store. Then we will widen the sidewalk and make a sidewalk bike path on West Street that goes up past the Bike Doctor and then goes up to Solomon's Island Road. Now, at Solomon's Island Road, you dismount, you make a choice. Do I go across the road to the Parole Town Centre and all those residences there? Or do I go across the road to the Double T Diner where all those residences are behind there? Right. Or do I go underneath 50, because there's already a bike path underneath 50, and then pop out at the hospital? And then you can go past the hospital and you can go onto the town centre, the mall. So and then you can discover Crownsville and all those areas that are.
There's a bike path under 50?
Yeah, or a wide sidewalk. Yeah,
so it's a multi-use path.
Yeah,
I seriously didn't know about any of these paths.
So, but you're right though. It's stop-start in this town. We have stop-start. So we have someone had an idea, and no one finished the idea. So so you can see that's a beautiful bike path on Forest Drive. How good is that? But it stops and it starts, and that's it. And then so what I'm here to do is try to create this inner city network of bike paths, walking paths, and running paths that are multi-use. And when you're on those paths, you go past theatres or schools or ball fields or whatever it is to sort of explore your town. And if there's a development we're working on now that if we can pull it off on the public works site, that developer will contribute to 2 bike bridges, one across Spa Road and one across Forest Drive. If we could do that, you could get across Forest Drive safely. You could get to Annapolis Middle School. You could get to the back of Quiet Waters Park. That could be a consideration. Or you could go across Spa Road and go over to the library and then connect to the Poplar Trail. Or go the other way across the bridge and go to Maryland Hall. And I think one of our most underappreciated things is Truxton Park. That should be our central park.
September 29th, the inaugural Twist and Stout Festival at Quiet Waters Park along the shores of the South River. Twist and Stout, a Maryland wine, craft beer, music, food, and arts festival. Presented by the Anne Arundel County Department of Recreation and Parks, along with the Maryland Wineries Association. Sample dozens of craft beers and Maryland wines. Dance the afternoon away to the sounds of Saved by Zero and the Groove Spot Band. Watch the plein air painters and shop dozens of artisans, crafters, and food trucks. Tickets are on sale now at twistandstout.org. twistandstout.org. September 29th, Twist and Stout at Quiet Waters Park, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Tickets at twistandstout.org.
When you think of Watermark, you probably think of Harbor Queen. You know, the big white boat that sits down at the end of City Dock. But did you know that Harbor Queen is much more than just a visitor attraction? That thousands of local school children take field trips aboard it every year to learn about the Chesapeake Bay and our region's history. But that's not all you don't know about Watermark. When the Susquehanna River crested, washing thousands of tons of debris into our waterways, Watermark was there, rolling up their sleeves, helping the Annapolis harbor master clean up Ego Alley. And when the Annapolis Police Department SWAT team needed a boat to conduct special training exercises on to help protect our waters, they called Watermark. Watermark, making our mark. To learn more about how Watermark is here for our hometown, visit watermarkjourney.com.
Big picture on the bike master plan. So it envisions essentially a network of bicycle or multi-use facilities to get around through sort of corridors. So one of them is this east-west between City Dock and Parole, but then there's the Forest Drive corridor, and then, you know, connections between those, so that you basically have like a network or a grid that you can get, you know, pretty much anywhere around the city.
All the way to the B&A trail. I mean, if Steve Schuer's talked many times about bringing the B&A trail into the stadium, so and it wouldn't take a lot to create the infrastructure to make that happen, and then we could cut into that from the historic district down King George.
I think this is a big picture issue that, you know, first of all, I didn't know. I saw the bike path plunk down in the middle of downtown Annapolis. I saw them get fired up, and I didn't know that it connected. I didn't even know the existence of the master bike plan, frankly.
Because you don't live in the city.
Yeah, I'm isolated from the rest of the
But it's your
county.
city still, and that's what I say all the time. You live in Edgewater, Crownsville, Arnold. It's still your city. You still call yourself an Annapolitan. And you should have just as much say about downtown. I think we all have a say of downtown because it's the state capital, you know.
But the businesses are fired up, and I think a lot of that is maybe the way it was done. That they thought that it moved very fast. And I mean, you're an entrepreneur, so for you, it's experimentation. It's seeing, you know, A/B tests, what work, what doesn't, and we've not seen that in government as a whole. I worked for an entrepreneur for 10 years, so I understand how it works. Is that, you know, you try something, you see how it works, and if it doesn't work, you temper it or you adjust it. But we've not seen that. So the business owners are upset, you know, because they see the spots that are missing. They see the aesthetic value. How do you soothe them, or what do you do to reassure them?
I communicate with them. Obviously, it's made a lot of people upset. You know, I definitely haven't made any friends. You know, I might not get re-elected again. But, you know, I'm here to try new things.
Do you want to?
Look, I want to make things happen, you know. I think then we can. We have a lot of untapped potential. And all I was asking for that community is, you know, I think cars are pollution. I think cars don't look great. And they own the best real estate in the city. They own the city dock. We have 150 cars on the best real estate in the city. They own both sides of Main Street. I said, can we try this out? Look, if I would be satisfied if out of this exercise, maybe we reversed the traffic on Main Street.
I'd love to do that.
You know, and maybe you could just come down it and it was a shared lane. And then maybe when we re-brick Main Street, we decide to create a plaza there that we can close down when we need to program it, like we do on the first block of West Street. That Upper Main Street should be the most valuable real estate in the city. It should be the hottest place to want to do your business because it has the money view. You know, so even if that comes out of this conversation, then it's been worth. And the one thing I've done, and I've said this a bunch of times, is I've done what no other mayor has ever been able to do. I have unified the merchants on Main Street. And
you have.
That's true.
One of the things
argue that. How do you? I mean, you've pissed off the merchants. You've pissed off the council.
Well, that's shooting fish in a barrel.
I've heard that you've. I've heard some grumblings that now all of your focus is on downtown, and you're sort of ignoring some of the public housing communities and whatnot there. Arguably, they're not arguably. I mean, there are some fences that need to be mended come October 19th. When this thing ends, how do you plan to do that?
I mean, just because I'm working on a bike path doesn't mean I'm all over the city. If you look at my schedule, I'm in lots and lots of places. I just did a huge gospel concert at Maryland Hall this Sunday. That is the biggest one the city's ever had. I was a big part of that. I focus on a lot of things at once, but I believe this is about connecting communities. I believe this is about. And my favorite thing in this whole city is to go on the Bates track and see Latino families and African American families and white families and rich people and poor people all enjoying that exercise route together because because you can, right? And that's how we come together as a city, by good public space. Good community space builds good community, and so it's going to take some work to get back in favour, even if with the Main Street businesses, if we start to meet once a month and they tell us what we want, then that's progress, and so I will commit to that once we've lifted the bike path.
And that's one thing I've heard for years and years, that the businesses, and not just Main Street, anywhere, does not have a voice with the city. And I get that they're not voters for the most part. But I've always said that they should have a seat. Maybe it's non-voting on the council, or to have the ear of the mayor. Because I mean, honestly, if every one of the businesses closed down, we're out of business.
I agree. I mean, like, they treat business owners like second-class citizens in the city, and it shouldn't be that way, because you're just as much a part of the community. If you come to your shop for 12 hours a day, you stand there, you know your neighbours, you sit out front with your cup of coffee, you're part of the community just as much as some guy that goes and works in DC all day and just comes home on the weekend. I think that we need to do something about that. But the voting, your system has created that, don't you think the system has created that, where you don't have a vote as a property owner of a business, you only have a vote as a resident.
Well, the issue I always had with every business group that existed, ever since the ABA and then the
DTAP.
Yeah, but all the groups is that it was all theoretical, that people were working on assumptions that I never saw any, and I'm not a fan of studies, but I'm a fan of data. So when people say, well, there's no parking downtown, well, okay, we've been saying that for years. I don't agree with that. I think there's plenty of parking. You know how to find it. You know where to find it. But people are working on the assumption that that's an issue. So say, okay, let's see if there's a parking problem. Let's do surveys. Let's do this among people who are local, or people come in and see if it's an issue. Let's calculate how much every one of those parking spaces are worth. So if someone comes in and they park and they spend an average amount of this, what's each parking space worth to the merchants? Why are the people coming downtown? Why aren't the people coming downtown? I think that when you look at something like this with the bike lane, where people are getting fired up, they're working on assumptions. They're saying, well, we're losing all these parking spaces. Going, okay, so we're losing 36 parking spaces for this. What value did those have to the downtown businesses, if any? And I always thought that the value of the parking spaces on Main Street were really overestimated.
Well, I think one of the things, and Rick from Eyes on Main I think it was him that had mentioned this. He said that a lot of it is the perception of somebody coming downtown and looking and seeing that space is not available. And if somebody is just coming up Main Street and looks and say, okay, well, there's parking. Oh, there's none over here. Oh, there's no space. Are they going to circle around and look for other ones, or are they going to go to the mall or whatnot?
But and I think go to the mall and try and find a parking space.
Again, you can argue that as well. I mean, you're going to walk further to that. But one thing I think the city does very poorly of, and Frederick does very well, is the signage. Okay, I mean, there should be, these big old green peas with the arrows to get you into Hillman, get you into Gotts, get you into Knighton.
I'd love to see the parking app by Park Mobile. I'd love to see them have the availabilities, like show you where they are.
If you go to the top of Main Street and there was a sign there that said 51 spaces at Gotts, and it's 500 feet away, which is really where the corner of it is, or something like that, 1,000 feet away. Then people... And then we realised, like I've said, that the top of Main Street to the bottom of Main Street is less than the mall, one end of the mall to the other. But you're right, the signage is the issue. But I think that the biggest thing we have to think about here, what we've been doing so far is not working, right? There are more vacancies on Main Street now than ever. We know we've got Amazon to compete with. And what we have to do is try to make our Main Street more unique than the mall or more unique than anything. And we have so much to work with because it's real. It's got real history. It's got real characters that live in this town and real water. And it's the most beautiful place. And so, but you've got to make it special. And what we've been doing so far hasn't been working. So I'm going to try some things. And obviously I'm trying crazy ideas, like boutique hotels to bike paths and stuff like that. So we'll see
where the hell were you when Amazon talks? You should have gotten Amazon to come here to Annapolis.
Someone said it on the Eastport Forum. I've just been kind of just lurking there, just kind of reading the chaos. And one woman said something about, she goes, who cares with the parking? She goes, it's all T-shirt and souvenir shops. Anyway, I'm like, where have you been? Downtown, there's very few of that now. There's some incredible places downtown. Mm-hmm. Like I did all my Christmas shopping downtown this year or last year. And if you're local, you know where the spots are. If you're coming in from out of town, you're not going to circle a couple times and then leave Annapolis because you couldn't get parking. I don't think it's a deterrent. We've said it before.
I think you need signage there. And
I agree.
I
make it easier.
I did all my Christmas shopping. Well,
so speaking of signage, I mean, there have been efforts for how long? 7, 8, 10 years on wayfinding, and you can go talk to Sally Nash and she'll give you the whole thing.
It's been very slow. I mean, City Hall's got a sign out front now. There's one.
Right. There's finally
steps.
some. Right. But it's taken. So when you talk about the process, that process is so. It essentially comes down to analysis paralysis, where it gets so bogged down that nothing can ever happen.
It's crazy.
I mean, it eventually does, but 10 years later.
So when we put a bid out for the Hillman Garage, it will have to include some signage for Roe Boulevard that ties in digitally to all the garages. I hope that you know when you come in that it says 50 spaces here, 30 spaces there, and no spaces at City Dock. The reason we have such a traffic problem is because everybody thinks they can park on the water. And so when they come to try to park on the water and they don't get a spot, then they drive around and cause gridlock, and we get gridlock at Gate 1, we get gridlock on the Eastport Bridge. But we've conditioned people to think they're going to park out front of the business they're going to, or they're going to park on the water, and that rarely happens. But locals, and that's what's interesting for me, that why people are so frustrated, none of us ever make a plan when we go into Main Street. I'm going to go and get that spot on Main Street. Before you even get to Main Street, you've gone to the secret spot that we all know where we park at. I've never made a plan around jagging that one on Main Street, so I was surprised at the huge backlash.
Yeah, my secret spots involve like ladders and.
See, I negotiated my secret spot with my divorce attorney. So I said, you got enough of my money. I said, if I can put a note in there, can your towing company keep it?
So with respect to knowing how many parking spots we have, that's something that we've talked about with SB Plus, who's the parking contractor that runs all of the city facilities now, is that it's not rocket science to put sensors in all the spots and connect all that stuff up. It just takes money. So
I'll tell you what, I know that Mayor Buckley has a soiree to go to.
Oh,
he says
fancy.
He's all over town, and he's got an appointment to go to. One last question. I mean, have you learned something? I mean, when things are coming on out of everything.
Look, I learned. Well, I don't go on social media that much. I feel sorry for my wife because she starts. I'm like,
I feel sorry for her too. She sits there. She needs to get off of social media and stop defending you.
I know she's always doing. I mean, people aren't there to be convinced of the other thing. They're there to just hear people that think like them. I think a lot of times on social media, you're not going to bring someone around.
It's awful now. It's horrible.
Well, tell Julie that. I mean, even though I may disagree with you and everything else, I'm friendly. I mean, I'm harmless.
People, I'm like you. I love it if you give me a hard time. I think that's good. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what's wrong with the world. We have to have different opinions. I want you to make fun of me or call me on something if I do it wrong, because that's all right. And I don't want to be surrounded by people that just think like me, because that's even worse.
It's kind of my dream.
Well,
actually.
And the last thing is that when you do the test on the Ferris wheel, will it be done any differently? I went on record saying that I think the Ferris wheel would be a good idea.
It would have made money. It would have got people at City Dock. I said I wouldn't buy one, but I didn't say I wouldn't lease one.
Well, I'll tell you, Mayor Buckley, thank you very much for taking your time. It was after working hours for sure, because we all know those city employees, they've got those 32-hour weeks. Just not the elected ones, though.
And just like that, we made sure he's never coming back.
It's great. Now, there is a survey on Annapolis.gov for the bike reactions, and that's going to be something that's going to be continued throughout the test period and afterwards there. Bike AAA.org.
Yep.
You can learn about Bike Annapolis and Anne Arundel.
And of course, the Lifeline 100 is the county ride that goes all over Anne Arundel.
Are you doing Lifeline 100?
Yeah, I've done it a bunch of times. Yep.
Okay. Are you going to do it this year?
I might be at a conference in San Francisco, so I think.
So that'll be a wimp out.
October 7th.
October 7th. I am personally doing the 35-miler. Alex, I'm sure, is doing. You're probably not doing anything because you're running.
I just wing it. No, John has been the martyr. He never rides it, and he always works it. So one of these years we'll have to switch places.
Pass the baton and everything. And Tim, you're going to be sitting on your couch on October 7th, right?
If I drive 30 miles, my back starts hurting. So that's how geared up I am for biking.
Alrighty. Well, I thank you guys both very much for coming in. Learned an awful lot about that. This thing, you heard it here, this thing is coming down starting on the 19th, which is a Friday, so it may be the 22nd or 23rd or something. We don't expect it to extend anything like that. And depending on what happens on Thursday and the mayor's meeting with the business owners, we may have a new mayor come Friday.
Gavin's fingers are crossed.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks. Always great being with you guys. Thank you. Cheers.
This has been the Maryland Crabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them in all the regular places, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.